Hey and welcome! Last week was my birthday, so I decided instead of buying it, I am doing my party outfit just by myself. I used this fabric and all in all I just spent 26 euros on the whole outfit, which is very good in my opinion. By the way, my fabric is 160 centimeters wide and 2 meters long. Now let's talk about my plan, because if you are DIYing something, and in this case I'm doing it completely from scratch, you need a plan. So the plan is to do some wide leg pants and a two-piece set. That's just more practical in case like you want to go to the bathroom. That's why I decided against a jumpsuit. And although pockets are very practical, I decided against them because first of all, you often wear a bag when partying, and also it keeps this elegant look if you don't have pockets. And since my fabric is jersey, I'm not using any zipper or other closure system, but just a normal elastic at the top. By the way, my fabric is see-through, that's why I'm gonna do some underpants in this video. But if yours is not, or you don't care about that, you don't need to do this step. And before we come to the top, I just wanted to say that that's not a full tutorial, that's just a sort of join my creative process so along type of video. Because as you can now see on the screen, that was my plan for the top. And I also wanted to do a jumpsuit originally, but then I just did not longer like the design. So I changed plans. For the final design, I then decided to just keep the wide leg pants but change the top a bit. So for the top, I decided to keep the deep round neck, but instead of doing cutouts at the side, I did a triangular cutout at the front. That's one version of wearing it, but it's my birthday, so it's not about simplicity. That's why I also made another strap to kind of help knotting the top in the middle so that it forms folds there. And then we are gonna add another kind of waist part that goes around the waist at the front, which also helps to clean all edges in the front. And then in the back, we do not attach it to the back, which it is in the front, but we just only sew up until those parts right here, so that we can use this part to knot in the back. That's why I needed to make those straps a bit longer, obviously, because you need to do the knot. And as you already have seen, I did not do any sleeves, but just decided for some straps. And now let's finally start to sew! Wait a minute, before we start to sew, I just wanted to say that, as I said, we are doing everything from scratch. So I used those two jumpsuits that I already had for like some reference, for example, how wide the legs need to be and so on. And then what I did is to, tape me fully covered and then draw the neckline and everything. By the way, that was my original design, but we can use the neckline so that, I know how it fits and how deep it needs to go, and also how far down the top needs to go and where the bottoms begin. So now let's talk about the pattern pieces that we are gonna need. First of all, I decided to do the top. Therefore, I used this kind of mock-up, and as I said, that's the original design. So I just used it as a reference for the neckline that you can see right here. And then I just, kind of freestyled the lower part there with the triangle. So in general, you'll need 2 top pieces and 3 straps, 1 for the knot and 2 just normal straps. And then you'll need 2 back pieces. Just make sure that the side seams are the same length, but for the rest you can also freestyle. And same as in my case, the back part is not as long as the front part, which is okay as well. and this shape is also just drawn by hand and then cut out. And lastly, we will need 2 waistband parts, and the length is actually up to you. I just made mine, I think, 110 centimeters, and also the width is up to your personal preference. And by the way, those are not squares, so I changed that up in the process. That's why I said that's not supposed to be a tutorial here. Okay, now let's finally start to sew. We start sewing the 3 straps by just folding them right sides facing and then sewing along the whole edge. If you want to, you can zigzag or serge the raw edges, and after turning them inside out, you could also top stitch them. In my case, I did not do that. And as you might can see here, my strap for the knot is a bit wider because I just want it to be seen. Let's start sewing the front and back piece. I use 2 layers of fabric since mine is see-through, and it's easier because there are no raw edges, for example at the neck, that you need to hem. Since the fabric is very scratchy on one side, I want the soft side to lay on my skin, which is why we do lay the pieces right and wrong sides instead of right sides facing each other together. The piece that can be seen from the outside needs to lay underneath. And next you sew the necklines, the armholes and the bottom seams, leaving the side seams open on both pieces. By the way, I also already sewed the straps to the front piece. Then I just measured my desired length of the straps and sewed them to the back as well. And after that you can turn the whole thing inside out and top stitch the seams. Now let's start with the waist pieces. At first I sewed it together like I did it with the back and front piece, which means right and wrong sides facing. But then I quickly realized when you do the knot, there are 2 problems. First of all, the straps were way too wide, and second of all, since we used this method, you could see the wide soft side of the fabric on the outside. The solutions for those problems were to just cut the pieces way smaller and cut off one piece so that we could sew it on in a way that both right sides would show on the outside in the end. You can see how I did it here. I think explaining it might be a bit confusing. In case you're unsure, pin it first and then just see if it turns out correctly. And after that, as we already did it in the beginning, you close the rest by sewing it right and wrong sides facing. And now the last step for the top is to just attach it only to the front bottom seam. As you can see, this piece right here is a bit smaller, which is correct in that way because I stretched it when sewing so that it sits tight on my waist. Now we can start to sew the bottoms. Therefore, as I already said, I used those jumpsuits for some reference. And also I measured some things, for example my waist, and then I divided it by 4, or the length that I wanted my pants to have. And then with the help of some trousers patterns that I already had, I created this front piece. By the way, the link of the video for this pattern is linked up here. Then I flipped the front piece over, pinned it in place and cut it out so that we have two mirrored front pieces for both legs. For the back pattern, I kind of just copied the front piece and changed it up a bit. You need to make sure that the side seams, the inner leg seams as well as the waist seams are the same length. But one alteration that I did is that I made the leg a bit wider because I feel like then it sits better on the leg since you have a calf in the back. And I also changed the rounded seam. And then I just repeated the flipping, pinning and cutting process. First, we only sew those round edges right sides facing together. So pin them in place and then sew with a normal straight stitch, and don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and at the end of the seam. In a next step, I then lined up the front and back piece and then I sewed both side seams right sides facing together. After that, line up the inner leg seam and sew it right sides facing. My tip would be to start at the top, because only then you can make sure that this part lines up perfectly. In that way, in case there's, for example, too much fabric on one side, you could just cut it off at the hem and you do not need to seam rip anything. Here comes now the additional step that I talked about earlier on that you do not need to do in case your fabric isn't see-through. I just copied an already existing pair of tight pants from my closet, and then I just sewed together the pants just like we did it with the pants before. Here's now how they turned out, and as you can see I also serged the raw edges so that they lay nice and beautiful when attaching it now to the real pants. As I said earlier on, don't mind that you can see pockets here. I cut them away afterwards. Now what you're going to do is again use the same method, so do not line them up right sides facing but wrong and right sides facing. As you can see right here, I think it's better to understand if you just watch this video. Explaining would be a bit confusing here again, I think. And then I just pinned them in place, made sure that every side seam and front and back seam lines up perfectly, and then you sew with a normal straight stitch all the way around. And afterwards you can turn the whole project inside out through one leg. Here's now how it should look like, and then you just take your elastic, measure it in a way that it fits nice around the waist, then you just sew it together and then bring it in place. After that, I sewed this elastic in place by just sewing the front and back and side seams, like it's called sewing in the ditch. So you just sew where the seam is so that nobody can see that there is an extra seam, and also the elastic is secured. In case you want to, you could also kind of create a tunnel by sewing below, for example 1 or 2 centimeters below the elastic. Then I just needed to hem the bottom, and yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun while doing this 2-piece set. Make sure to subscribe to not miss out any further videos, and now here comes the final reveal. Bye!